Bandai, you have surprised myself and many other players yet again. Whether it's a good or bad surprise remains to be unseen. Today's video briefly looks over the new limited and restricted list, but not in a reactive way. Today's focus is to digest those limits or bans, and those unrestrictions while also postulating substitutions you can use moving forward. While not exactly a one-for-one on the same effect, as players, we can complain about the situation, or we can stand up on our feet and adapt to the new game. Again, players, thank you so much for being civil with one another in my Scorched Earth Dream video. And with that, let's look at moving forward. For the limits effective November 17th, Bandai introduced 5 new restrictions. No bans, just restrictions. I'll start with the individual cards and then move to what in essence is an engine. Out of all the predictions I had for my discussion video, only one came true, and that's BT13 Geo Greymon. As previously mentioned, this Digimon was going to become highly abusive in BT14. In combination with Yellow Vaccine decks and BT14 Patamon, you could cycle through many cards potentially in security with a simple promote. It's not that simple though, because it was also abused in shinegreymon. Though there can be times where this effect completely whiffs, both with Patamon and Geo Greymon. Regardless, I see the point that Bandai is trying to make. In regards to substitutions, no other Digimon does exactly what this Geo Greymon does. Sunrise Buster is also already restricted to 1 and can play a red or yellow tamer for free. And all other cards that would normally play a tamer are in the level 5 category. BT4 Rise Greymon requires a Digiburst for a red or yellow tamer. Rise Greymon X can play a red or yellow tamer when digivolving. All in all, this hit may slow down shinegreymon decks mildly, because your tamers that return to security cannot necessarily be played. But for generic yellow decks, it's a huge hit that compromises BT14's deck building. I've seen the light, and agree that BT12 Marcus, while powerful, may have been too harsh for shinegreymon, but feel that the Geo Greymon hit does hurt deck creativity in the infancy of BT14. The second restriction did indeed take a jab at Mirage Galgamon decks, but while it wasn't a tamer, it did go after a Digimon. I did not expect this restriction, but it does make sense. EX4 Mach Galgamon. When digivolving, this Digimon returns one of your opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon to the hand. But its inheritable is where you can unsuspend this Digimon once per turn if your opponent has 8 or more cards in hand. Funny enough, even though this Digimon is now restricted to 1, you have 2 other Mach Galgamons that have inheritables that unsuspend. Granted, both BT11 and BT13 require an effect to add a card to your opponent's hand on all turns. But if you wanted that return effect, unfortunately the Digiburst one from BT4 is the only option, but you lose that inheritable unsuspend. Decisions will have to be made on what you prioritize moving forward. But hey, at least BT4 Thomas Norstein remains untouched. But the main restrictions that Bandai went after, the generic purple draw trash engine. Since BT6, any deck that played Beelstar, Lilith Loop, Merva Loop, and other purple heavy decks had the following cards always together for a fast trash setup. But Bandai has decided that with the generic purple engine, apocalymon has become too rampant, limiting newly reprinted and blinged out BT2 Gabumon, Starter Deck 6 Gabumon, and Eismon Scatter Mode. And while purple players may feel absolutely gutted at this moment, I'm thankful that Analog Youth did not get the hit. But with so many inheritable draw 1, trash 1 effects, where does one go? Ironically, Starter Deck 6 Gabumon was not restricted to once per turn. Neither is Starter Deck 6 Garurumon FYI, but Bandai has learned, and with the new Starter Deck 16 Gabumon and Garurumon, both these Digimon are once per turn. But for Eismon Scatter Mode, no Digimon will ever truly replace this Digimon for the fact that no one can draw 3, trash 2, and theoretically jam when attacking. Jokes aside, I've marked up several Digimon that you can utilize for their on-deletion draw and trash effects. Dark Lizardmon were largely staples already in Merva Loop decks, for the fact they have retaliation. Gizmons, both AT and Proto, have draw and trash mechanics as well. But if you're looking at more trashing regardless and don't mind a little RNG, Analog Youth and Dobermon are also very viable options. Better yet, if you're wanting generic rookies to play that you draw and trash on play, Labramon, and the new Starter Deck 16 Elecmon are also viable options to add to the deck. Overall, after taking a step back, yes, there were a lot of hits to purple. Justifiable? I feel a little much for the English release, considering we're not seeing the carnage over there with EX5 and BT15. But in retrospect, when you look at the vast pool of cards we have now, and in the future, there are more cards to fill in the gap that were lost. Are they exact? Not necessarily, but a draw trash engine still remains. And while that would normally be the end of the video, Bandai also released some cards from the restriction list. This will add some additional testing and potential new competitors to the meta previously not seen in Japan. First up, Savior Huckmon has received the unlimited treatment. Previously, this Digimon was limited for the fact that you could play a Sistermon and had an unsuspend effect that could give OTKs, especially in combination with Taikumiya, seeing that Jesmon is a red Digimon. While there are newer cards that can reduce your Digivolution costs, frankly, I don't see a problem with Jesmon players sitting in the back again and not running the From Master to Disciple option card. You could run both, but presently linear stack decks in the raise and building into a Jesmon next can provide the piercing, attacking into an opponent's unsuspended Digimon and rip 2 security off the top. By the way, this makes Starter Deck Greymon again very viable in this deck. As I wrote this script, I'm starting to think unlimiting this card was a mistake. While true, none of these cards are searchable in a typical Jesmon deck, keep in mind that red training option cards will become available, which will bottom deck only Sistermons and Omnimon. As of right now, I'm leaning towards this card was a mistake to unlimit. The last and final card that came off the restriction list was Tommy Himi. This one probably shocked me the most, considering again this is the only blue card in existence that costs 3 and strips 3 from a Digimon. While Blue Hybrid was doing fairly well in the BT7 meta, following its limit, it rarely trended. But with Jamming Bukamon appearing in BT14, along with Zudomon Ace, I can't help but wonder if this was intentional. Regardless, with option cards like Sorai and decks like Ulforce Vidramon who can play blue Tamers for free, I definitely think this Tamer was a mistake to unlimit. In conclusion, this restriction list had 2 ways to approach the current Japanese meta problem. Split the list between the English and Japan, or only target cards that both releases have in common for a common list. Because I don't see Bandai catching Western audiences up to BT15 in a speedy fashion, the only course was a common list, which would inevitably target older cards. This is why I scoured through all the sets to look at which cards have been running rampant for too long. Never would I have expected so many hits to purple, but as players, we can adapt. From the English side of things, the list is fine. I don't really see a problem with it. But I do feel for my players playing the Japanese format because this list does not help their current predicament, at least in my mind. Which does edge them closer to a separate list that may go into effort for us later, but would that affect sales? Which deck would you like to see first on the road to Nationals now that testing can truly begin? Which decks are you hyped for, and which are you dreading to see? Because of the restriction news, I'll be pushing back my EX5 review for next week, and potentially starting some deck profiles this week. Stay tuned. This is DIGI-PANDA, logging out.